Hey guys, welcome to the Supergrowth podcast. And in today's episode, we speak to Amir Bazrafshan of Apricot Video Marketing. And we're talking everything video on this one. So you got content, what is video marketing? We're discussing content production, content distribution, key metrics when doing video marketing, what's happening with deep fakes, the background of video marketing and where is it heading, and a bunch of other very interesting stuff. So let's dive straight in.
Yeah, my background. So my agency is Apricot Video Marketing. Apricot's been going for about 8 years now, but my background personally is it's marketing as much as it is film and video production.
Got it.
So after I graduated, I started working in marketing positions, product manager positions, marketing manager positions, but also had a passion for making films. So I would write and direct, a lot of short films, and that eventually led me to a position for a film distribution company where I was head of content and head of marketing. So my job there was to take the films that we'd acquired and that we'd be putting into cinemas or on DVD, create trailers, teasers, campaigns, and then distribute them online to raise awareness of the films, so hopefully we could make a bit of money. And then after doing that for a good, I don't know, four years or so, I thought there's an opportunity for me to start something myself and to really jump into that.
Right.
So that's what gave birth to Apricot, basically.
Right. That's nice. And I think you've also been doing your own podcast. You've been speaking to a bunch of people as well. What's been your sort of learning with that? What's been the, let's say?
Well, yeah. So I guess I've taken the podcast as an opportunity to learn, basically. And yes, I want to share as much, knowledge as I can. Working in this kind of area for so many years, I have notice things and pick things up, and I want to share stuff, but also I want to learn more as well. So even just the podcast where it's me talking about strategy, for example,
right,
that's a useful exercise for me personally, because I have to articulate everything that I think I know. And what it does is highlight any blind spots that I might have, or things that, if you can't articulate something simply and clearly, you probably don't understand it as well as you think you do.
Right.
So that's one part of it. Obviously, kind of in terms of content marketing, it's great to have a piece of long form content that you can use, you can repurpose, you can use to build relationships with your audience. And then the last episode I was lucky enough to interview a guy called Phil Nottingham, who's probably the wisest video marketer on the planet.
Right.
And I always learn a lot from his slide shares, his YouTube videos, his blogs, and learned a lot from speaking to him as well.
Right. That's nice. So I think let's just I will just get straight into content, so it's a good warm up. But I think, we've in fact shared some thoughts before that. I'm just going to run through, what your thoughts are on video marketing in general, how it's gone mainstream, where it's heading right now. And sort of where it's come from. It's been around. I mean, we've been doing storytelling in different formats of let's say communication. Where do you think this is, what's the journey been of video marketing itself, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so I guess it's quite funny. Like, people think that video marketing is a new thing, but brands have been using video and film to advertise their stuff for decades,
right? For
decades and decades. And all that's changed, really, I mean, yes, there are some tactical things that have changed, but it's the way that video is made and distributed, which has been the groundbreaker.
Right.
And working in, I worked in video marketing before YouTube launched. That wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun, because the making of it was much harder. Nowadays we have, these things which you can record good quality video content on.
Yeah.
But just hosting video online before YouTube was a real problem. It was a real issue, and it was slow. And YouTube coming along and making the distribution of video so easy,
right,
was, I think, a real big thing. It was
Mm.
such a big thing, a big part of helping to spread video marketing. So it wasn't just for the few brands that could afford to advertise on TV. We
Right.
had this new way of distributing video content to literally millions of people for free.
Mm. Yep. And you think that that sort of, let's say, engineering problem had to be solved, and that distribution had to come in for it to sort of, really kick in? I do
Yeah,
find that.
because
Yeah.
I suppose if you take YouTube out of the equation, and then from YouTube you have Vimeo, Wistia, Brightcove, all these other hosting platforms, right? If you take that technology out of it, everything else is the same. You've
Right.
got cheap and easy ways to make video content, but no way to get it in front of people, or
Right.
rather just very few expensive ways, which is television.
It's funny you say that, because I think what's that really done is is democratized it for everybody, and not just for the agencies, but also for brands itself. I mean, a lot of people are just skipping agencies and just going straight in. It's become
Yeah, absolutely, and that it has been democratized, and that's a good way of putting it, and it's lowered the costs and the barriers to enter. And I'm all for people making their own stuff, so long as they're doing basic things like following a strategy,
right.
And getting some basic production values in there as well.
Good. All right. I think this question I've been wanting to ask you. This is something which has been more of a prediction kind of a thing that a lot of people have been making. But I don't know. It's sort of forward-looking, but also looking at the back of where we've come from. So are we in the early days of let's say video, or are we at the saturation point? Is it the same thing in terms of looking at, let's say, how websites were, and everybody said, what, this is not something which is for us, this is not something we do, and then eventually just turn to 1.5 billion websites around the world, where today everyone's just doing catch up, and that's just become a norm now. And there's the same thing with social, where people said, what, this is regular, we don't want to do it. You think video is at that point where is it like, are we in the early days, or are we at the saturation point?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think video marketing is maturing. It's funny. I think it's been. I've seen articles say that it's the year of video marketing every year since 2012. So I think that the importance of video is becoming more and more understood. Even though I speak to people that still don't see the value in it. If you're looking at the bell curve of adoption, I think we've crossed the chasm.
Right.
Yes, I think it is. I think it is mainstream. The issues that I see are people in general not really understanding how to best use video or how to measure video. So the measurements of success, the KPIs, what you need to be really focusing on.
Right.
And I think, to me, that suggests that I don't think it is the super early days of it. It's maturing, but we still have a ways to go.
Right. And do you think that's also around people educating themselves around these kinds of things? You think that's what's like? I think lag?
Yeah. I think it. And I think understanding video marketing it goes against things that are intuitive to us. So you might look at a video and see that it has 500,000 views and think that's a good video.
Right.
But until you dig deeper and look at, the right people watching that video content, how much of that video content are they watching? How engaged are they in it? What are people doing after they've watched the video? What kind of conversion has there been, either physically or emotionally?
Right.
If you don't know all of those things, just looking at a metric like view counts, it's not going to. But people place so much value in that.
I'm just sorry. Yeah. No, go for it. Complete it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting 1 million views on a Facebook video, but a view on Facebook is 3 seconds.
Right.
And if you have a video that's 30 seconds or a minute, 3 seconds, I mean, so what? Do you know what I mean? It's adding no value at all
right.
to your audience, and it's not helping your brand.
But you think that's also become a measure of other things? Like, you know, the way, I mean, of course, I think then we start entering into social proof, and then we start looking at authority and, you know, these kinds of areas around how people, let's say, are influenced. And, you know, a lot of times what people look at in terms of views are around social proof that, you know what, if 5 million other people have looked at this, or at least it's been viewed 5 million times, it must be worth my time. You think that's basically what's at play here?
Potentially, yeah. People perhaps see it as validation, but then again, it's cheap to buy views nowadays.
Right.
So you can put not much money behind a video and buy those views. You're not earning the attention of people. Right. It's not because those people actually necessarily want to see that content. It's just because you paid to have it in front of them, and that video player has been on screen for 3 seconds, and you get a view from it. So again, yeah, I think that people, because I suppose it's an immediately visible metric, but there's people put way too much investment into that. Whereas, you know, if you have a video that's got 5 million views, but if we could see the engagement rate, say if it had an engagement rate of 5%, then no, you know, that's not good. So we're not seeing the whole picture, and it's sort of tricking people because it's such a surface level statistic.
What do you think? Like, it's just off topic in terms of, let's say, not video, but the Instagram likes angle on this. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because, you know, I'm not convinced that people just kind of double tapping on an image necessarily means that they like it or they're engaged in some way. I think what's important on Instagram, for example, is comments. I think that's really good. It's a good place to create a community, and to have conversations with people. My partner, she runs a business from Instagram, and she has almost 40,000 followers, which compared to other people isn't super high number, but they're just very, very highly engaged. And she's not at all concerned about the fact that likes are disappearing, because she knows that she gets 200, 300, 400 comments on a post, and that's engagement, and that's way more valuable.
And so I'm going to bring video back on this, right? So you think video is a much better way of sort of getting there, as compared to, let's say, passive content, or because there's also another aspect here, because you can't really trust a statistic on the internet, is how I look at things. And there's this one that goes around that says 97%, let's say, if you put out content with relevant images or content, you get 97% better response. And so I went back and cross checked where that came from, and so it's been in blog posts for quite some time. I think the last one I see is 2012, and then it just gets lost in some research paper somewhere. But people are still talking about that trend in 2020. So I don't know that, but being a practitioner yourself, you think video really is what they're making it up to be? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of of stats, because they're just numbers in isolation and they lack a lot of context. And like you say, what you did was exactly the right thing, to try and backtrack and see actually where did this come from, under what circumstances was this pulled. And yeah, I don't like using stats, because, like you say, they can be a little bit misleading, and it can lead people to think that video is the answer, right? And any kind of video, just have video content, right? That's the answer, according to these stats. But there's more nuance than that. And I would never say that video is just the answer to everything. It has to be part of a coherent strategy that involves other tactics as well. And while video can be more engaging, it can also be unengaging as well if it's bad video.
Right.
So I think the important thing is to focus on getting the right video content for the right reasons in front of the right people, rather than just having content because a stat says you're 50% more likely to be on the first page of Google if you have, a video on your homepage or whatever.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's what I sort of believed as well. I think a lot of people don't do the background work around it, and either it's taking something that other people are doing and just doing it, in terms of, let's say, just like let's do video because somebody else is doing it, or it's around hacking the algorithm or trying to hack the algorithm because I don't know, Gary Vaynerchuk sort of mentioned it, or I know Neil Patel probably does it more than Gary Vaynerchuk, but where he mentioned it in terms of the algorithm and sort of hack the algorithm, etc. But yeah, but the other argument, sort of, I'll play the sort of, let's say, I don't want to play the devil's advocate here, but the other argument is also around the fact that platforms have sort of enabled people who've sort of been the early users, early adopters of the video strategy. You think that's still continuing, or that's a good sort of way of also looking at it?
What, in terms of platforms integrating video in more elegant ways?
No, I mean, let's look at TikTok right now, right? It's supporting, it's a video-based sort of platform, and basically all it's doing is helping you get so the more content you put out, right? So that the volume question comes in. We get the relevance question there for sure, but because the platforms are not so uptight, because they're new and they want people to sort of succeed within the platform, they push people a lot. And then what we see is companies who haven't sort of caught on to that end up doing a lot of production value later, just to try and figure out an algorithm which is really gone by maybe a year and a half back. You think it's still a good strategy, sort of, get into platforms early, the newer platforms early, especially if they're offering better, let's say, boost to your content if it's video?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the TikTok thing reminds me of Snapchat a few years ago when Gary Vee was telling everyone to get onto Snapchat. And yeah, being first is a good, or can be a good thing to do. You can establish the audience on there. You can create authority on there. I would never suggest to a client that they just automatically go ahead and just rush onto a platform just to be the first.
Right.
You have to make sure that it's serving, because fundamentally it's just a tactic. And the danger is getting ahead of yourself with tactics and forgetting about your strategy.
Right.
If it ties into the strategy, if your audience is paying attention on that platform, then go for it. You can integrate it into a part of the plan.
Right.
If you're just going on there out of fear of missing out, or just to say that you're the first on there, then it's going to be more of a waste of time. It's not going to be worth that investment in time, or if you have an agency create TikTok videos for you, whatever, that financial investment as well. So I think my advice probably stays pretty rigid, depending on platform. Is it going to help the strategy? Is it going to help you get closer to your goal? And are your audience on there? And if the answer to those two questions is yes, then by all means, let's do some experimentation on it.
Right. All right. That's fair. But okay, I think let's just move into newer areas of how video is playing out. I see a lot of people recording themselves. This is an example of that. You and I wouldn't have sort of launched podcasts and video, and I've never thought of myself as growing up and I'm somebody following me around with a camera or something like that. I still consider it every day, considering all these guys do it. But yeah, I've always sort of wondered whether that's that's another sort of 24/7. I think Justin Khan was the first guy who sort of did that with Twitch, sort of Justin.tv, and then of course it's gone mainstream recently. But then there's Neil Patel, right? He doesn't do the same thing. He shoots himself in terms of, let's say, the production in a studio, but these are small snippets of, he doesn't share much about his life. And what he's doing is he's just educating people around the subject of whatever he's trying to become, let's say, position himself as an expert on. Whereas you see other guys doing, let's say, shooting, having a crew around, and Ryan Serhant, and you got all these everyone who basically gets recommended once you watch Gary Vaynerchuk on YouTube. So what do you have to say to that? Yeah, which one do you think is a better way to do it? Yeah, especially looking at personal branding, just to give it a bit nuance.
Yeah, well, again, I don't think there's an objective better way to do these things. Neil Patel does what Neil Patel does, and I've seen his videos, and they're pretty well put together, and he has a lot of success from them. A lot of it will come down to personality. Gary Vee is a very different beast altogether. I guess he started with his Ask Gary Vee show,
right?
Which was sort of a evolution from his wine show. He was very, very, very early on YouTube. So I guess his approach to video has just evolved quite naturally for him. I'd probably be more in the camp of Neil Patel, if, when I'm going to do more video content in the future.
Right.
I very much doubt that I'd have a cameraman follow me around and check out, what I'm having for breakfast, or things like that.
I don't think it'll be that bad in Nottingham though, but it's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I think personal brand is part of it. And Gary Vee, if you look at what he's actually doing, he's almost becoming celebritizing himself, if that's a term.
He's already done that. He's already done that. Yeah.
Well, he's on talk shows and things like that, and that's his plan. That works for him. It works for his personality.
Right.
And he's very much the talisman for VaynerMedia, because people know him. People, because of his profile, will want to work with him because of that.
Right.
And then he can funnel them through to his agency, which has had unbelievable growth. So it works for him. So it's not. I know he's got a lot of critics, but it works for him. So.
Yeah, I think from a video standpoint, for sure, I think it's a very efficient system of doing it. So I heard of pillar content for the first time in 2011, when we was just generally digging around the internet and, sort of snooping around what's going on, what's not. I wasn't particularly sort of, let's say, correlating it to how things would pan out. But yeah, that's such an efficient way of doing it, and video being the richest form of, let's say, content. Something like this kind of a show moving on to, let's say, a podcast or like a blog post or something like that, it just works out overall. So I think that's been a brilliant strategy. That's worked out. I think, but it brings me to execution. And when it comes to execution, we talk about production value. And that's a big question right now, because on one side, you've got something like Media Monks, which is WPP. Martin Sorrell has gone in and sort of, let's say, moved into that space, and they're expanding rapidly. So on the enterprise side, Media Monks is, let's say, moving in the world's largest production, let's say, house, which is, let's say, global. But on the other side, you've got all these creators who just pick up their phone and start recording. And this is like the entire, the entire spectrum of it. And which is where I think the line gets divided between what Gary Vaynerchuk is doing and what Neil Patel is doing. Neil Patel is actually sitting there and, in front of a camera. There's a crew in there in a different format. It's not raw form. It's not natural. So there's higher production value compared to, let's say, Gary Vaynerchuk, which is probably, like, even if you take the 20 people away from him, he's just going to pick up the phone and still sort of work on, let's say, still shoot his videos. What is the right kind of way, let's say, a small or medium-sized business should approach this? Because they get pitched quite a bit for getting into heavy production, considering everyone else is doing it, etc. Or do you think it's lightweight, start off with something which is lightweight and then move into something much heavier?
Yeah, potentially. I think you can get bogged down in video production values. I think you can, because you can watch a video that might have a budget behind it of 100K, where they're shot on 4K cameras and had a crew and a cinematographer, and it could be boring. It could be boring garbage. And then you've got someone like Mr. Beast on YouTube, who has millions of subscribers and gets millions of views, and it's just a simple camcorder. And I think what that does, I think it shines a light on the fact that it's the content itself that's a really important differentiator, and the production values come second, I think. So I think if people want to get started, by all means, shoot some stuff on your phone. I mean, that's absolutely fine. But where you've got to put that value into is to the thought into what it is that you're filming, not how you're capturing it, but what it actually is, because that's the thing that's going to engage people. So to give an analogy in the movie industry, you have a film like the Blair Witch Project that was filmed very, very basically on very cheap equipment.
Right.
But it's you know, a really good concept, and it did very, very well. Lots of people watched it. And then you can have movies that have multi-million-pound budgets.
Right.
So quality of the piece isn't equal to the production value.
Right.
And I think that it can trick people or blind people to actually what's really important. And it's about the material, and it's about the story that we're telling. It's about the value that we're getting into the message.
Right. You know, it's really, you know, it's fascinating sort of, you know, to look at that sort of, let's say, polarization, or you call it like a spectrum, or the dichotomy of these entire stories, because the flip is also true, and like a lot of these guys go with heavy production and this and that, and sometimes it just makes sense, you know, sometimes it's just, you just need it, you know, for a large brand to sort of do that. But we have seen a shift though, and that's, I think, the entire Media Monk story that's happened is, you know, shorter form content, you know, small bits and pieces, and then rapid storytelling across a longer timeline, by dropping little bits and pieces to people sort of to consume. Do you think that's also forced a lot of creatives and people like us to sort of, let's say, it's challenged us to sort of compress everything into a very small storyline, like a really small timeline, to make it, you know, bite-sized? And if you keep the long-form content out of this, let's say, question, you think it's forced creators to sort of come up with something within 10 seconds and 15 seconds and 5 seconds? Yeah.
Do you mean in terms of perceived concentration kind of like levels and what people are willing to consume?
No, I think I'm more referring to, let's say, agencies and people within the, let's say, the professionals around the space and storytellers and creatives. Has it forced everyone to sort of compress their, let's say, trying to get too much done, or trying to get it done all in, let's say, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10-second windows? So basically storytelling in the form of a 10-second clip. Yeah. You think that's really forced everyone to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. I think there is a consensus of thought that the shorter the piece, the better, the more engagement it's going to get. And there is some data that will back that up. There is, I think, a misconception that our attention spans are like 7 seconds long or something, which isn't actually accurate.
Right.
But I think that does put pressure on, or an expectation that can't make longer form content. And really, it's kind of silly when you think about it, because look at Netflix.
Right.
You know, they're a huge business, and they have an awful lot of subscribers. They're doing pretty well.
Right.
And their content, it's not 5 seconds, it's not 10 seconds, it's 20 minutes, it's 30 minutes, it's an hour, it's movies. So I think that just goes to show that if it's the right kind of content, people will be willing to watch and invest that time in it.
And I think the flip through that is, right, I think, I mean, I think I would agree with that. I think you ended it correctly in that one, to say, you know, two really good examples to that is Joe Rogan, you know, with his long form podcasts, especially putting them up on video, you know, where it's traditionally been an audio sort of a method of doing this, and you're just basically watching two people talk, which is this particular video right now. So I think it's storytelling in its richest form in that sense. You know, somebody snooping in, a third person snooping into two people's conversation is what I sort of, you know, what the real life equivalent is in my head.
Right.
And then you always do that, right? You do that at airports, you do that at, let's say, McDonald's. You're standing in the line and somebody's speaking and you want to snoop in and, you know, listen to what they're saying. And now you're so invested in the story, you know, you're probably now delaying your burger is because you really want to know what happened to, you know, the cat and the dog and this and that. Yeah. So I think Joe Rogan's piece is done, sort of, let's say, sheds real good contrasting light to that. Netflix for sure. I think another guy who does that, not in video but for sure in his content, is Ramit Sethi. I don't know if you he does the "I will teach you to be rich" guy. Yeah. So, you know, he sort of talks about that as well. Like, you know, when people are invested and they really want to know about a particular subject, they'll listen to anything, they'll watch anything for maybe 10 hours. You know, completely get that. You know, this basically. So I mean, comes down to, I think, context more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Phil Nottingham and I on our podcast talked about, what an approach that him and Wistia have coined called brand affinity marketing, whereas actually being inspired by platforms like Netflix,
right?
They've created a product called Channels, which really facilitates the creation and distribution and presentation of like longer form serialized content. So Wistia have their own talk show. MailChimp now have like MailChimp Studios, and they do like an episodic, almost like sitcom drama. They've got lots of different stuff on there. So that's long form content that's really designed to get people to spend time with your content, with your brand, and build that affinity. But then the way that they market that is the way that Netflix would market a TV show, which is through trailers, clips, GIFs, memes, etc.
Right.
So it's really the combination of long form and short form working together as part of a bigger plan and strategy to engage your audience.
Right.
So I think just the fact that that exists, I think hopefully, because I mean, people love things that are black and white, right? Which is better, long form or short form?
Right.
Hopefully that will show that there's more nuance than that, and actually things can work together.
Right.
Like you say, depending on the context.
Yeah, I think completely makes sense. I think a lot of people are not looking at the let's say mixture of two. Everyone's looking at the black and white, like you said. I completely agree. All right. What else do we have? I can think of analytics. Which direction you want to take this right now? I can take this answer. You think analytics is an area you want to move into, or I'm just trying to think of I don't know, tools. What's your favorite subject outside of whatever we've discussed so far? Any other area that you'd like to touch upon?
Yeah, I don't mind. It's whatever you think your audience is most kind of interested in. I'm happy to talk about tools, kind of whatever you want. It's fine.
Okay. I think. All right. So I think moving into, let's say, industries. So traditional industries have been sort of, let's say, they've been using the expensive ad, we've been discussing, the enterprise spending a lot of money just coming out with one kind of campaign. Very few of these guys have been doing, let's say, the content marketing that you and I are talking about. You think this sort of, let's say, video is also not sort of going to touch, or at least volume of video that we're talking about on a day-to-day bite size is also going to touch laggard industries and those kinds of guys who are not, because I see a dichotomy wherever I travel. There are these heavy industry guys who let's say from steel, metal, traders, etc., who think this is not relevant to them, who think this is something which really is something that happens on the consumer brand side of the story, but not on the B2B side. And I don't blame them, because there's no real, let's say, what do you call it? I think the industry hasn't moved there. What's your thought in terms of those kinds of companies and industries?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think that there's a big kind of misunderstanding over the terms B2B and B2C.
Right.
I think that whether you work in steel or if you're looking to buy a new phone or whatever, you're a human being, and people. Yes, I think there are differences in sales cycles and stuff in B2B and B2C. Fundamentally, we're still selling to a human being, whether they're wearing a suit or they're wearing a tracksuit or yoga pants or whatever. And I think that is overlooked sometimes. And if it was embraced more, the more traditional kind of businesses, like you mentioned, might be more willing to make that investment. And the thing is about companies like that is that they would stand out so much in their marketplace if they went in and embraced something like video marketing in a way, obviously, that would appeal to their demographic, their audience, and it's a bit of a missed opportunity, I think.
Right. It's funny we say that, heading into 2020, that it's still something that I think a lot of let's say people need to be educated about, and I think that's also something that's really happening right now. Is people like you and me, and a lot of other people are doing that and getting out and reaching out and speaking to people around that, is because I still bring it back to that website question, that I think this is where the window is, and if there is, it's only late in the cycle, or let's say at least mid-cycle, like you said, it's gone mainstream anyway. But I think if a business misses this opportunity, or an individual misses this opportunity, there's only that much bandwidth in a human being's head to sort of make correlations to people, and sort of I look at it more like let's say, how many people can you now think of and make recommendations of? Maybe, I don't know, maybe like 2,000 people. That's like a stretch. But at the top of your head, probably it's like 100 people who you would probably immediately recommend, and Gary Vaynerchuk would be an example of that, and let's say Neil Patel. But these guys never existed in our heads, like a few years back. And they've just created that space, and they don't go away, is because the sort of, let's say, the volume of and the consistency in execution that they have, and I think if this window goes away for a lot of businesses, it's going to be the website moment where you just look back, or the social media moment, you look back and you're like, listen, we missed it. You still think this is also going to be true for like these kinds of businesses?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know if I think you can be late to a market and still make something of it, and I'm quite sure that there is like a sweet spot of when to enter it, and ensure kind of like ignoring an opportunity to engage with your audience in a really entertaining, fun way could have a negative impact on a business. It could make the brand or business seem like they are not modern, that they're not making investments that their competitors are making, for example. But I think it would take a brand or a business that was very off the pulse to completely miss the opportunity.
But it will get expensive, though. You think that the barrier to entry sort of goes higher? You think that's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I think there'll always be more expensive options, and there'll always be low cost options and completely free options as well. There are a number of video builders kind of online platforms where you can make simple videos yourself. So I don't think people would be priced out of it. I think it's just more potentially hurting the image of their brand.
Right. All right. So I've got two interesting thoughts in my head. Okay. One's on analytics, and then the other one's looking at deepfakes within the video side of the story. Which one you want to pick? Go for it. What do you like?
Why not analytics?
Okay, go for it. Yeah. That's fine. So, I'm not a very technical person when it comes to video analytics, and I think a lot of people who will be sort of tuning in aren't as well. We'll just start with the basics. Like, what do you think are the KPIs that we should look for, or like the kinds of things that you should look for? Or what do you look at? What do you look at? When you're looking at a good performing video?
Yeah. So, first of all, let's distinguish between metrics and KPIs. Metrics are just things that we can measure, and KPIs are telling us if the thing is working well or not. And what we look at is contextual to the platform and where in the funnel that piece of video is kind of operating. So the KPI for a brand video at the top of the funnel would be very different to a product video at the bottom of funnel. And maybe on the top of the funnel, we want engagement plus reach. If it's a brand awareness piece, we're going to want to make sure that, yes, it's reaching a lot of people, but people are engaging with it as well. Mm-hmm. Further down the funnel, it's going to, in my experience anyway, looking at conversions, is the video helping to convert people on that product page, or more people buying on the A/B split test on the page with the video than without.
Right.
So it's highly contextual. I would say though, looking at your own videos, if people are going to look at them themselves, always look at the engagement rate. I think on YouTube it might be view rate. It's basically the percentage of the video watched. So if you've got a video of a minute, you know, if people are just watching 5 seconds of it, then you've got to dig into that and figure out why. If people are watching 55 seconds of it, then you know you've made a piece of content that's resonating with your audience, probably going to be more memorable, probably depending on the context of the actual content itself, help to be persuasive as well. Right.
So engagement for sure. I think engagement has been something where I think it's been lacking, you know, in terms of at least the larger companies that we look at, because the smaller companies sort of, you know, see it, or at least mid-sized companies see it because it doesn't convert the bottom line, and they immediately sort of, you know, spot it. The larger companies are still, you know, we see this day in, day out. They put something out, there's one comment on it, production value is probably sitting at thousands of dollars. You're trying to figure out what that is, you know. So for sure, I think it's engagement rate ultimately is going to, you know, sort of turn that. Right. Any other metric or any other, let's say, any of the formula, any of the process that you think, or I would say like a formula or something which you think that people, like a combination that makes a good video. So I've got top of funnel, let's say, attention of people. I've got a decent conversion rate. Any other thing that you look at when you're looking at this?
So what I would suggest, and this only works on platforms like Wistia, for example, where on Wistia you get all the metrics that we've talked about, but you also get heat maps of every single view.
Right.
I'm just talking about Wistia because we use them, we have used them for years. I'm not affiliated with them in any way.
Right.
And I'm quite sure that other platforms like Brightcove or Vidyard do similar things. But they have a heat map for every single view. So you can actually see literally how people are watching your video. So are they skipping certain parts? Are they replaying certain parts? And what you want to do, if you want to understand how to make better videos going forwards, spending some time, once you've got a critical mass of views, it wouldn't work with just like 10. You know, you want to get a critical mass of views because then you've got more data to analyze. It's really looking at what's working, what's confusing people, where are people dropping off, and given the context of everything, why might people be doing that? So if you create a video that's got a 30% engagement rate, that's people watching 30% of it on average, that's not particularly good if it's like, you know, a short form video. It doesn't mean that video doesn't work for you. It just means that particular piece of content wasn't great for that audience. It's an opportunity to learn. So the next video you make, you can get more engagement, 60-70% engagement.
So you think shorter cycles of rapid experimentation sort of is a better, let's say, way of looking at video rather than you know, a single, let's say, let's just record it, put it out there, and then wait for people to come. That, you know, that's what you're essentially recommending.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it as like a lean startup kind of like, you know, a lean kind of methodology like that, but just in terms of video content that you're publishing, pay attention to how people are watching it. Pay attention to that beyond what people say, because I think the data speaks louder, especially, you know, a critical mass of data speaks louder, and you can learn an awful lot from that.
Right. That's really insightful. So, you know, that's a nice sort of way to look at, skip the comments, skip what they're saying. Also because it's becoming so automated right now, you know, LinkedIn and all these other guys are giving you, you know, the fire emoji and the, hey, congratulations, you know, and then, you know, I'm like, okay, you can't really do that, can you? It's just so scripted at this point. And I completely get it. Like, people are so scripted about what they comment as well. That real conversations are hidden in data or actually speaking to people, but even then you really don't know what's really going through their heads.
Exactly. And I think the LinkedIn example is a good one, because there are some people who would perhaps comment on a video or even a post just to get their name visible underneath that person, because perhaps it can create more engagement for them, it can get more people onto their profile, etc. So you know, that can happen. So how much can you actually kind of like trust it? Someone could feasibly say, best video I've seen all year, and not actually have watched it.
Yeah, I think that's happening on Twitter anyway. So I think most people are just like, most people are just putting that out, comments around famous people. You see that all the time. This movie. So you mentioned Wistia. Any other platforms you think are, sort of, let's say, doing well, or people should look at, or so is Wistia like the one that you use most often, or what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah. So if we're looking for a client and they want video on their website, then it's Wistia.
Okay.
That we don't use YouTube and embed it on people's website.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube can be useful for reach.
Right.
So depending on what the objective of the video is, it'll determine the platform that we put it on. On YouTube, there are some benefits to doing it and some drawbacks as well. For example, after someone's watched one of your videos, a suggested video could be that of your competitors, which might not be what you want. Also, on YouTube, you don't get video SEO benefits, whereas places like Wistia, they inject metadata into the page, so you actually get genuine video SEO benefits.
Right.
On tools like platforms like Wistia, and I'm sure again Brightcove and Vidyard do this as well, but you can do email capture within a video player, help you to build a list or to get inquiries. You can embed clickable links into video players, so that whilst people are watching and engaged, that you can push them to an order form or another blog or whatever the plan is. But there's just more interactivity. So depending on what it is you're trying to achieve, what the video is and the point of the video, then it will determine the platform. But yeah, YouTube for brand awareness, social media, engagement, brand awareness, and I would say Wistia that we use, for mid to lower funnel content.
Right. Okay, so I've been waiting for this one since you picked analytics, and I've been thinking of all the deep fakes, in the meantime. And so I just stumbled across this website. I think it's called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And it's ridiculous, because you keep on refreshing that page and it just shows you it's real people, and if you don't tell someone that, this is what's happening, they're just going to ask you, who's this guy? Or, who's this person? And it's happening with videos. It's not as mainstream as I thought it would be during this time. But do you think that's really going to play a role in how content's going to be shaped going forward?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of experience with kind of deep fakes is just stuff that I've seen online where people have shared and said they can't believe that this has been faked. I think it's potentially a very dangerous technology. People can take this technology now where you can take a still image of somebody and create video.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm speaking to you anymore. I don't know if I'm speaking to Amir anymore.
Oh right, yeah.
It could be. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the challenge. That's a challenge, isn't it? And I think the issue of deepfakes obviously goes beyond kind of like content marketing. It's got some quite dark applications and implications. It's getting to the point where stuff that we see, video is always a very trustworthy medium, right? Because that person is there talking.
Right.
It's getting to the point now where we're going to have to be asking questions. Is this real? What I'm saying, is it real? Do we take it with a pinch of salt? So it could be, I think it's potentially a pretty dangerous development.
Right. Do you see a universe in which it could also be useful, to let's say scale up operations or scale up volume? And I can see early starters in that scene, really taking advantage of, let's say, being able to replicate or, so multiple languages is one thing that I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So one of the things like personalization typically doesn't scale, right?
Right.
So if you're using a tool like Soapbox, have you used Soapbox before?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
right. So if you're using a tool like Soapbox or something similar to reach out to people or to clients or potential clients, whatever, and you want to be very personal, there's only so many of those you can do in a day because that's a sacrifice for personalization, right? Lack of scale.
Right.
So if there's something that can give personalization at scale,
Right.
then that could be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, so me and my friends, from the agency side, keep on talking about that. Basically, this is pillar content. There needs to be something that marries pillar content to precision marketing, and that's basically, I think, where technology is going to step in, because that's basically the question. That needs to be answered from a production point of view, and I think whoever answered it first, whoever answers it first, or let's say the bunch of people who do answer it first, will be able to sort of take a lot of advantage of that. Yeah. All right. I'm just trying to figure out any other questions that we've sort of got, any other thoughts that you've got, any areas that sort of I need to touch upon or we need to touch upon. Anything you can think of?
I don't think so.
We've covered quite a bit.
I think it's been pretty comprehensive, yeah.
Yeah. I think we can bring in a bit of social if you like. I don't know if that's your core area of maybe video on social. Is that something that in terms of platforms you think that's a decent area that you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what specifically do you want to chat about that?
Yeah. So I'm just let's say an overview of what's happening within the platforms. I just shoot the question. Let's see how it goes. Right. So so there have been a lot of, let's say, new platforms that have come about. The building I'm sitting in right now has ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, and they've they've got like 3 platforms currently going on. They've got something called as Hello. They've got TikTok, and there's one more. And effectively, it's just targeting the same crowd, right? It's the same people that they're trying to look at. And then Instagram has now sort of taken that, they've embedded the music, let's say, feature on their, aggressively been embedding the music feature on their platform right now, trying to take that away. And all of that is around storytelling. I think Pinterest is moving into videos as well, as far as I think I recall. Facebook is anyway trying to do that. IGTV is already there. So, there's so much of platforms going on, and from a video perspective, let's say from a distribution perspective, it just gets chaotic because you can't produce for one, and then, because now they've got like this thing where they don't allow cross-platform. I don't know why they don't. I mean, I get why they don't allow it, but it's because it forces you to sort of, let's say, specialize or customize it for that platform. I get their angle on it. But, somebody who's, let's say, looking at distributing content, what do you think the strategy should be? Like, which are your, let's say, favorite platforms that, in terms of distribution?
Well, again, it comes back to if they're looking for the best social platform, they've got to look at their audience. I mean, that's where it starts and ends, right? Because that's who we're trying to reach. If you're in a B2B place, it's going to probably make sense to go on LinkedIn.
Right.
Although, there's a good argument to say something like Instagram right now, if it's done in the right way, or even Facebook, because you can use video ads to be very specific and targeted.
Right. It's fine. Your video had gone blurred. It says it's gone blurred out. Yeah. No, it's fine.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Sure. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just has to come down to what you're trying to do and the audience in question, and that will differ depending on the brand, that you are.
Right.
I do like Instagram as a platform anywhere. I do like that. I like the stories feature, and I like the IGTV thing. It's encouraging, and it enables longer form content on a platform that used to be just kind of all about micro content.
Right.
So I do like it as a tool, and I think the demographic has spread. It used to be just hipsters taking nice pictures of their coffee, and it has kind of like spread. So that could be a good one to investigate for sure.
So, in terms of platforms, a lot of times, what do you think about Twitter, though? So I've been reading a stat around, and this is, of course, Twitter releasing the stat, so I can, at least partially believe it. I think it's around 2 billion views. No, sorry, it's 2 billion videos or 2 billion views. People basically, I think they're 2 billion views in a year on Twitter in terms of video. So what are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, again, it's a view statistic, so you just take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. And like you said, what they're trying to do with that is sort of bombard us with an impressive-looking stat that, on the surface, sounds impressive, but really, when you think about it, it's a little bit meaningless. I think if you don't have an engaged audience, you could post whatever you wanted, and no one would watch it, and no one would engage with it. Right. So it comes down to your approach to that platform. How you're curating your audience, and and the value that you're giving them.
Right. All right. This has been good. Any takeaways? I think I can sum it up as, I think context is one that I think you've sort of, sprinkled throughout this entire sort of podcast. I think engagement is another one that you've been big on. Overall, looking at that as your starting point. Are you really engaging with people and going beyond, I think, the comments and, what people are actually saying, and looking at the data. And also, I think, observing what's happening rather than just relying on a report or or somebody else coming in and telling you. Just understanding your company and your demographic better. I think that's been the overall.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say just to encourage people to get away from black and white thinking. So and I think that it's nice and easy to think about that. We can soundbite black and white thinking, but it's very, very misleading. So you can't think that one platform is necessarily better than another. It's all about, like you say, it's all about that context. It's all about the specifics of that particular circumstance, and then looking at your goal, your strategy, and then your tactics in that order, and making sure they're married up. And if you do that, then you've got a greater chance of success with video than if you don't do that.
Boom. All right. I think that's been a brilliant wrap up of that. And I think we've sort of gone all over the place with regards to as much as we could in terms of video. I think it is great chatting with you. And hopefully, hopefully we'll have enough updates in the video scene to probably do another one. This is great. Nice speaking to you. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.